Hello, guys. So sorry we can't have class like normal today. We do have the ACT here on campus, so I'll be struggling to make it through the day without my phone and technology, but we will make it through. In the meantime, I figured I would go ahead and record this for you guys. If you have any questions, be sure to jot them down as I'm going through this so that we can talk through them tomorrow. So we're talking meat production methods today. That's going to be CAFOs, free-range grazing, and fishing are our three categories. CAFOs are concentrated animal feeding operations. Excuse me. So basically, when you think about like the big companies that do things like this, like Tyson, I don't know what a common beef brand is, but like Tyson chicken, for example, is a CAFO. These are going to be the ones that just mass produce tons and tons of livestock from their organization. So normally there's a large indoor or outdoor structure designed for maximum output. So that's going to mean that it's going to be high density and it tends to be crowded because their goal is to get as many new animals or eggs or whatever it is that they're trying to put out, get as much of it as possible for the cheapest cost. So that does lead to lots of crowding and lots of animals in small spaces. Animals generally are fed grains or feed, which is not necessarily as sustainable as grass if they were just kind of free roaming in a pasture instead of being in confines like this. And this is commonly used for beef cattle, dairy cows, hogs, and poultry. This does minimize the cost of land for the farmer, so they get to save money on land because the animals don't have as much space, and it improves the efficiency of feeding. So some examples right here. Pretty darn crowded. Some of the consequences of this type of farming, antibiotics that animals are given to prevent disease, because obviously when there are this many animals in such close confines, a lot of disease is pretty common. So those antibiotics that the animals have could lead to antibiotic resistance that moves up the food chain and eventually gets to humans. They produced a ton of waste. Obviously, if you've got this many animals in one space, that's going to be a lot of animal waste that comes with that. And normally they store their waste in waste storage sites, but the runoff from that can and does pretty frequently contaminate water sources. So this right here is what we call a manure lagoon. It's a lagoon that is full of manure, which is poop. So as it rains and that maybe overflows or whatever happens, that can contaminate the local water supply pretty badly. And then here we've got just an infographic kind of explaining how antibiotic resistance can move up the food chain. So the second type of farming is free-range grazing. In this situation, animals are allowed to wander around to feed on grasses. So you can see they've got a lot more space. They're just foraging for food in the grass. They're much less likely to spread diseases because they are more spread out. They've got more open, fresh air, and they're not standing shoulder to shoulder. So that reduces the amount of disease. Because there are fewer diseases, there's less of a need for antibiotics. Wastes are spread over a larger area, and they just get naturally broken down. So when you got this much space and, a pig or a cow or whatever uses a bathroom over here, it's just going to get broken down naturally by the environment. It does require a large amount of land, and the meat that gets produced is more expensive because they have to be able to pay for that land. So this can also cause some issues, some different issues than CAFOs can. Overgrazing can lead to desertification. So overgrazing is just when a plot of land or farmland gets exposed to continuous grazing for too long because the land needs time to recover. So this is why a lot of times people who own large farms will have multiple pastures, and they'll switch out which pasture their animals are in so that one particular one doesn't get just, the grass eaten down to nothing and then turn into really dry, dusty sort of desert type area. And instead, you rotate the animals to make sure that the land can recover and it doesn't get overused. All right, and our final category for today is fishing. Fish are the third major food source behind grain and meat. There are a lot of problems that we associate with overfishing, just meaning taking more fish from waterways than we should. It can lead to the reduction in populations for some fish species. So if we're taking the fish out of their bodies of water faster than they can reproduce. It can also lead to a reduction in the biodiversity in aquatic ecosystems, a reduced food source both for humans and for other animals in that ocean ecosystem throughout the food chain. Economic hardship for some people who rely on fishing for wages. So really large-scale fishing operations are kind of taking away some of the economic potential and earnings from small town or small scale fishermen who rely on fishing for their income. So sadly, and this is from 2006, it looks like this data is from 2006, so could be and probably is worse by now, but you can see there are fewer fish in the sea than there ever have been. In 1950, only 1% of the high seas were fished every year. In 1960, it was 33%, and in 2006, it was 63%. And then that darker blue line, the percentage of species exploited, overexploited, or collapsed. So that just means that we are dangerously close to just kind of getting rid of an entire species. In 1950, it was 0%, 1960, 39%, and by 2006, 87% of species in the ocean that we were fishing for were exploited, overexploited, or the ecosystem had completely collapsed. So that's pretty telling, honestly. So aquaculture is another option for creating fish intended for food. This is when you farm aquatic organisms. So it's like a fish farm, basically. It's very efficient. It requires just small amounts of water. It doesn't require very much fuel. And it's good because, worldwide people get 20% of their protein from fish and shellfish. So this could be a good solution. I don't know what this slide is supposed to be. So this is an example of aquaculture. They've got some nets within the ocean where they are raising fish in the ocean in these nets so that they can then harvest them for meat production. I don't know what this slide is supposed to be. I'm concerned. But it says the picture can't be displayed. Maybe it's not that important. Oh, no. All right, so freshwater farm species are going to be most commonly carp, tilapia, catfish, and trout. Down in the school system that I first taught in when I first started teaching in Greensboro, Alabama, they're actually one of the catfish capitals of the world. They have tons and tons of catfish farms out there. Little fun fact. Some of the saltwater farm species are going to be seaweed, oysters, clams, mussels, shrimp, and salmon. So a lot of shellfish in this category. There are definitely some environmental concerns about aquaculture. Some people are concerned about nutrient pollution because of the food that's being introduced into the ecosystem to feed the fish that are being raised, as well as more biological waste than what's normal coming from these farms. Excessive antibiotic use because, again, you can see these are pretty small spaces. So obviously they are going to be using antibiotics to make sure that there aren't diseases being transmitted around there. So those are going to end up in the water as well with the wild animals. Changes to genetic diversity resulting from escapees, crossbreeding, and competing with wild fish. So if we have like a genetically modified species of fish that we are, that we are raising in one of these aquaculture systems, and it happens to get out and escape, because that happens sometimes, and it escapes into the just regular ocean with the wild fish, it can lead to change in the genetic makeup of fish in that area. And it could also change the whole ecosystem because they could compete with the wild fish for resources and food. People are concerned about the degradation of aquatic ecosystems, and then also that diseases could be transmitted to wild fish. So if you have a disease that breaks out in this particular aquaculture population, then it wouldn't be that far of a stretch to assume that the wild fish that are out in the open ocean would somehow come in contact with that disease and end up with it as well. It's concerning. So in this case, risks of open water net pen aquaculture, and that's what this is called. The picture we've been looking at, where you've got a net out in the open water, you've got a bunch of fish in here that you're raising for the purpose of selling for food. Some of the concerns: invasive species. If you're raising non-native fish in that area, it could lead to the introduction of invasive species. If they escape, like we said, they could compete with the wild fish for food. The waste goes directly into the lake or ocean or wherever it's happening. So it's a really concentrated amount of fish waste and can lead to toxic algae outbreaks like the one that shut down Toledo's drinking water source in 2014. You can see there. New diseases and parasites. So, like we said, because they're crowded, that leads to more disease. And then drugs, if they're using antibiotics and growth hormones and they're releasing them directly into the Great Lakes, then they are going to, this is the example obviously from the Great Lakes, then they are going to affect the wild fish population as well. And that is that. I hope that was wildly informative. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email. Like I've said in my posts for today, I will not have access to the internet for quite a bit of today, but hopefully the testing will be done fairly soon into the afternoon, and I'll be able to go in and respond to any questions or concerns that you guys might have. All right, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.